Hello and welcome to today's webinar. It's our first webinar of 2020. My name is Danette Fenton-Menzies and I'm the Director of Learning at Magical Learning, and today we're going to be talking about adapting to change. Welcome to our participants. It's lovely to see people on the call. Thank you so much for joining us and I hope you're having an awesome day. There is a chat box if you would like to chat. It's just on the toolbar. You'll see it over on the right-hand side where the More button is. Feel free to join in and chat and ask questions as we go along. And I hope you're all having a wonderful day. So and Greg, I can see you're on, so welcome. This is going to be as interactive as we possibly can make it. I love having interaction on webinars. So what we're going to cover today is why is it important to adapt to change? So I'm here in Canberra today. I live on a farm between Gundagai and Cootamundra, and in the last couple of months there's been so much change going on with the bushfires, with the weird rain, hail weather, etc. Plus just everyone coming back from the holiday break generally feeling more exhausted than when they left because there wasn't a proper break. We're going to talk about how we can deal with that. We're also going to look at what is adaptability quotient. So or adaptability intelligence. It's a new, it's been around for a little while, or it's been identified for a little while, helping us to adapt to change. And then how do we use it to future-proof our career? And some really simple tools that help us be more adaptable. Now, I live this because in the last month, I have been home for 3 days in total. And the month before, I think it was maybe 6 days. My career and my job and my work takes me all over the place, and for which I'm so grateful. It also means I need to be highly adaptable. And so whatever we're using in this is stuff that I actually practice as well. And I'd love for you to share too. This particular quote for me is one of my favourite. It's from my coach, Robin Sharma. And it is, with better awareness comes better choices. With better choices comes better results. One of the things that I noticed is sometimes just one idea will spark a whole new way of thinking, which gives us opportunity to become more aware and therefore make different choices to get different results. I'm hoping today that this webinar will give you some insights into some simple things you can do to actually be able to adapt more comfortably to change. So enjoy and feel free to share questions as we go. So one of the things that I know is that until the beginning of the 20th century, our human knowledge doubled about once a century. It is currently doubling once every 13 months and is expected to double every 12 minutes. Now that's an astonishing fact. And I shared it with some students yesterday and they're like, whoa. So today is basically the day of least change for the rest of your life, because change is now just our new normal. I have a number of clients that don't talk about BAU so much, so business as usual. They now talk about CAU, change as usual. And it's pretty astonishing. But if you look back, even say 12 months from today, your life would have been probably less, up and down, less change than it is today. The technology is changing so rapidly, and we basically are left to catch up with that technology. Therefore, the ability to be able to adapt to change, accept change, and just get on with it is actually a really important skill. So adaptability intelligence, or adaptability quotient, is the ability to adapt to and thrive in an environment of change. As I said, change is our new normal. We get to choose in some instances to be able to adapt or resist. Other instances, we have no choice. The change happens and it's up to us how we deal with it. There's really only two things we control, and one of those is our mindset. So at any point in time, if things aren't working for us, we're able to pick a different way of looking at things. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Fast Company magazine talked about AQ in terms of it's the future of work. I look at my generation, I'm a Xer, and think a lot of my peers, we've had a couple of different jobs. I look at my children and they do multiple jobs. It's very rare that they would have one job at a time, particularly as a lot of employers are not employing full-time staff. In fact, often they're not even permanent part-time, they are temporary staff. So their normal is that they have to adapt. They have multiple jobs at one time in order to survive. Harvard Business Review called AQ the new competitive advantage. So this is one of these skills that as we grow our AQ, it allows us to adapt to the new environment that we are currently in. Some of the skills that we need, and one of the ones I love, if you look at any child, children are ultimately curious. They love to look around, put things in their mouth, ask weird questions because they're trying to understand the world around us. As we get older, we tend to lose that curiosity. We start to get embarrassed to ask questions when we don't understand. And yet it's that curiosity that allows us to grow and adapt. So I encourage you as we move forward to think about how you can grow your curiosity in order to look at the world from a number of perspectives, not just one single perspective. And with curiosity comes Angela Duckworth's growth mindset. Actually, sorry, it's Carol Dweck's growth mindset. Angela Duckworth, she's around grit. So Carol Dweck wrote the book Mindset, and she's done a TED talk on it as well. And she talks about people usually have one of two types of mindset. The first one, is a fixed mindset where they get to a certain point. For example, I'm an accountant by trade, and they go, okay, I've learned everything I need to know as an accountant, so I'm not going to put myself out to do new things because I might make a mistake, and who I am is a competent accountant. And so that would stop people from actually trying new things. The second type of mindset that she talks about is the growth mindset. And this is where we realize that the world is constantly changing and therefore we need to change with it. This means that we have to be prepared to understand that failure and making mistakes and having to ask the dumb questions are actually just part of our growth. So curiosity dovetails beautifully into growth mindset. At any point in time, we are able to move from one to the other. It just is us looking at ourselves and going, okay, failure, not getting it right the first time is a natural part of learning. So rather than going, I'm not going to learn that because I'm going to be uncomfortable, you lean into the discomfort and realize, my favorite phrase, change equals uncomfortable equals our growth. So that growth mindset will serve you for the rest of your life. Part of that also involves us learning to question things. By asking questions, we learn more. And one thing is, it's really important once we ask that question to give the person space to be able to answer us. I have one or two friends who sometimes get a bit carried away with themselves and they ask a question, and sometimes it might be me, and they go straight into the next thing rather than pausing to listen to what the person has to say. Being open to change, it's part of our mindset again. Being calm. So recognizing that change is not good or bad, it just is. The calmer we are, the more we're working with our brain. So when we're calm, we've got a lot of blood flow in the prefrontal cortex. That means we're able to learn and take in information better. If we're not calm, our blood flow tends to move to what I call the limbic system, the side of our brain which is about survival, the fight, flight, freeze and flock. And therefore, the more calm we are, we allow the blood flow to go back to the area that's going to take in that information. And one of the things I think that's really important is lifelong learning, which means we need to be able to learn, then unlearn, and then relearn. For example, last week I was in Melbourne and I bought a book about how to learn. Now, I'm a trainer. I've been a trainer for 20 plus years. But what I know is that there is new brain science that's showing that the way we used to teach is not necessarily how we learn the best. In fact, most learning doesn't occur in the classroom. It actually occurs in the breaks, in the pauses, and when we walk away from the learning material, when we go to sleep. When we go to sleep, our brain makes connections in our brain from the information that was in our prefrontal cortex. It files it away to see, do we need that in future? So it's a great tool to allow us to unlearn and relearn as well. So one of the lovely things you'll hear me say today is sleep, naps, breaks are all actually really good for helping us to adapt to change. And I think it's one of the reasons why this year a lot of people are more stressed at work is that they didn't really have a break because of the fires, etc. in Australia. They've come straight back to work. A number of people in Canberra cancelled their holidays down the coast because of the fires, come straight back into work and hit the ground running. And now we're third week in February and they're like, oh, I'm exhausted. And that's because they haven't done what is the natural thing that our body needs. It's to go hard, work hard, and then have a break. And that's where the actual work gets done. And that's what elite athletes do as well. They work really hard, they train hard, and actually they know that the deep work is done when they rest. I love this one. Change is inevitable, growth is optional. So for us, we have that ability to choose whether we grow or not. And I hope that you choose to grow. I'm assuming you are, given you're on the webinar. The first simple technique to adapt to change is actually self-care. One of the things the science is very clearly showing at the moment is when we take time to look after ourselves, and that could be doing exercise, it could be hanging out with loved ones, it could be reading a book. That time is actually us refueling ourselves. I know when people don't look after themselves and don't put that self-care in daily, they'll come to me in a coaching session and the first thing they'll say after I ask, how are you, is, Danette, everybody is, pardon my language, pissing me off. And I'll go, tell me about the last time you did something for you. I don't remember the last time I did anything for me. And what it tells me is they've been so generous with everyone else, they've forgotten about themselves. And their body is now at a stage where anyone around them starts to annoy them. The simplest way to deal with this, if it's not a medical condition, is to start putting a little bit of self-care, something that gives you joy, makes you smile. I generally advise with self-care that you do it by yourself, because then you are focused wholly on yourself. If you have perhaps a dog and you like exercise and your dog walks along nicely with you, fine, you can take the dog. If, however, the walking of the dog involves you being dragged along, then I'd say that's not really a self-care thing. Yes, for all, feel free to take the dog for a walk, then add something else just for you. Even a simple 10 minutes a day will start to boost your self-care. Some really simple things, getting the right amount of sleep. So sleep is our superpower. There is a fabulous TED talk that we've referred to in the resources at the end of this webinar. Absolutely encourage you to watch it. We now know that sleep does so many good functions for our health, both our physical health and our mental health, that it is one of those core self-care acts. Along with sleep is my favorite, naps. More and more, particularly when it was really hot and there was lots of bushfires going around in late December, early January, I found that I was quite tired and therefore I started taking some naps. Felt beautifully refreshed afterwards and just ready to keep going in the day. Exercise is obviously another one. Hydration, making sure, and by hydration, I've got this in a bottle because I've been traveling, water. There's nothing like water for hydrating us. If you don't like the taste of water, perhaps adding a slice of fruit such as lemon, maybe strawberries, oranges, etc., to give it a little bit of sweetness. But it is such a beautiful thing to drink good water, and it's great for our brain health as well. Taking breaks, for example, Harvard and the Energy Project back in 2007 did some research which showed that if you work for 90 minutes and then take a 20-minute break, or if you work for 45 minutes and then take a 10-minute break, you'll increase your focus by 30%, increase your health and well-being by 46%, and increase your creativity by 48%. No drugs required, simply getting up and moving away from your desk for 10 or 20 minutes, depending on how long you've been focusing on your work. And with that focus comes try not to multitask, because that actually drains our energy, particularly our brain's energy, which makes us less adaptable. Things like meditation, journaling, hanging out with loved ones is another one. At the end of the day, self-care is really important, because with self-care, we increase our resilience. We also increase our empathy and our resourcefulness. And the wonderful thing is, it's about looking after us. So it makes us feel good as well. Highly recommend. I'm curious, do you have particular things that you do to support you in terms of self-care? Feel free to share them in the chat box. I'd love to hear if you've got any particular things that you do. My favourite things are hanging out at our farm, reading books, and napping and travelling. That's the other thing I love to do for self-care. It's the best fun. All right. The next thing, and feel free to share if you do have suggestions in the chat box, is one that I read about in a book recently. And the book said a lot of the stress that we cause ourselves actually comes through our thoughts. When we're nice and present, we're in the best space to accept and adapt to change, because we're just fully there and we're noticing what's going on and we go with the flow. It's when we resist change. So the moment you start going to yourself, no, I'm sorry, no, this can't be happening, is the moment you've gone from being present to up in your brain trying to resist what is. And with that resistance, you invest a lot of your blood flow and your brain's energy in resisting something that is already occurring. Now, it doesn't mean if you don't like something that you don't resist it and change it. It's about acknowledging, okay, this is not how I like it at the moment. What do I need to do to change that? So getting present is really important. The second resistance we do with our brain, which drains a lot of energy, is craving things. For example, say that you wanted a new car, and you set a goal for yourself that you are going to get it at the end of February, for argument's sake. And maybe over December, January, you spent a little bit more money than you should have. So you now know in your brain, probably not going to be able to afford that car, maybe till March, April. So that's the reality. Why not accept it? But often what we do is beat ourselves up. We go, it's got to happen now, it's got to happen. And we get really frantic and chew a lot of our brain's energy. And our brain is the biggest consumer of our energy. Our brain is 2% of our body's mass, and it uses 20% of our blood flow. And that's measured, our energy measured through blood flow. That's a lot of energy. Therefore, every time we use it to resist or crave things, we're actually leaking energy that we could be conserving. The more energy we have in our brain, the more calm we are, the more we just accept what is. I teach all of my coaching clients to learn the phrase, it is what it is. Accept it. And then think about, okay, what's next? How can I change this? If I'm not enjoying this, what needs to happen to fix it? Instead, when people get stuck, they tend to use phrases like, I should, I will, I must. And you hear the energy behind that. They're not things about acceptance. They're like, oh, I should do this. Oh, I must do this. Rather than going, okay, it is what it is. How can I move forward on this and get the result that I'm after? That's a much more positive instruction to give your brain. I also learnt a fabulous phrase the other day. It comes from a book called Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg. And in it, he says, one of the great things you can do to set your day up, and this absolutely will help you accept change, is the moment you sit up in bed, say either out loud or internally, today is going to be a great day. What that does is program your brain from the moment you're awake to look for evidence of it being a great day. That is so much better than doing this. I'm just going to pick my phone up. Wake up, pick up the phone, scroll. Some people look at the news on their phone, and then they get out of bed and they're already feeling yucky because they've been distracted on a device, which is not necessarily about reminding them that today is going to be a great day. Accepting change, I think, is just when you know that reality is whatever it is what it is. How do I move forward on this and make it better? That's a much better approach than, no, I want to fight against this. It's not going to help you. It's not going to get you where you want to be in terms of work and life. The other thing with change is you'll know you're more present if you listen to your language. What I see when people aren't accepting change is, and they're much more up in their mind and trying to resist change, is their language becomes more dramatic. Oh, this is a disaster. This is a catastrophe. Versus it is what it is. How do I move forward? Just pay attention, whether it's you or those around you, their language. If it's someone around you, try to use more neutral language. For example, when someone comes in for coaching and they say, Danette, it's a disaster. Like, oh, you've got a little problem. No, you don't understand. It's a catastrophe. I'm like, there's an opportunity here, is there? And what I'm doing is trying to shift the language in order to get the blood flow back here, get them breathing, so they are able to come up with solutions to help themselves move forward. Language is another one to pay attention to. Now, this next one I really, really love. It's stretch yourself every day. So if we're going to have to adapt to change because change is happening and we know it's happening more rapidly, then one of the ways we can stay on top of that is actually to do stuff that makes us uncomfortable. Whether it's smiling at a stranger and saying hello, whether it's doing something that's always made you scared. For example, last year I went to a theme park. I don't like, previously I said to myself, I don't like those scary rides. And there was a roller coaster which had a couple of 360 degrees and it was called the Hulk. So they shoot you out of this roller coaster at some phenomenal rate and then you go into these loops and spin around, and that goes for about 30 seconds or thereabouts. And I went, I'm terrified. Notice my language. I don't like these types of rides. My brother and my niece convinced me it's time to give it a go. Walking upstairs, I'm thinking, and I could hear my brain going, And I went, you know what? Get over it. It's going to be finished in 30 seconds. You've watched heaps of people do that. No one's died. Get on the ride. So I got on the ride and first time around, closed my eyes the entire way. I was like, got off and I was like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Went on it the second time and kept my eyes open. I'm like, wow, this is pretty amazing. And I'm not saying get on roller coasters every day, but doing tiny little things to stretch yourself can be a really good way of just learning to adapt to change. If you're not comfortable public speaking, start by talking to 2 people and build up from there. If at work you need to get better, perhaps at having difficult conversations, there's another thing that, okay, just start practicing with a friend first. And then if you have a staff member you need to talk to, take the time to talk to them and learn from that, get feedback. The beautiful thing about stretching yourself daily is that you will feel more alive. A number of years ago, I was teaching a group and we were talking about resilience. And I said to the group, hands up the last time you felt alive and what were you doing? And the group sat there going, and I swear it was probably 2 minutes before someone went, oh. And I said, tell me, what did you do? And he went, my daughter wanted to jump out of a plane. I'm absolutely terrified of heights, but I couldn't let her go by herself. So he said, I went there. And as I got up in the plane and it's going up, he said, I'm breathing scarily. Got up, and then they pushed us out, or we jumped out. And he said, in the moment we jumped out, he said, I was fully in my body. I had to pay attention, or else it could have had serious consequences. And he said, that was the last time I felt fully alive. Notice your days. When we do same old routine, we tend to be comfortable. The problem with comfortable is it doesn't necessarily mean that we're actually growing. And without doing that, we end up eventually being a bit numb and a bit bored. I'm curious, what sorts of things do you do to actually stretch yourself a little bit, whether it's daily, whether it's once a week, once a month? I'd love to know what you do. I'm forever trying to find new adventures to stretch myself. In fact, this year, my theme is adventures. So please feel free to share in the chat box if there's anything you do that actually helps you to stretch yourself and adapt to change. One of my favourite things, and it's sort of a habit, but it's also a little bit stretching, is I pick books from topics that I'm not familiar with, and I read those in order to grow my understanding of different careers, different philosophies, etc., which again broadens my way of thinking. Travel is another one, and I love eating new different types of food. That's another way. Even a friend of mine, we were talking about this and said, you know what, when I go shopping, I'm going to pick 2 new ingredients every time I go shopping and work out how to use those in my food. And I thought, that's actually a really great way to stretch yourself in a tiny way, but learning about new cultures, etc. Simple way of doing it. Now, the next one is, oh, actually, can I go back to that last one? Because I do. Excellent. Thank you, Jez, for sharing this. Try things like meditation or stillness. Love it. Again, they're really great for us adapting for change because they help us to calm our mind. It's a great suggestion. The other question I had for you is there something that you really know you need to work on and change that you've been resisting? Then maybe start with tiny steps towards that thing that you need to change. In the book Tiny Habits that I was referring to previously, the author talked about when he decided he wanted to get fitter and he wasn't really comfortable getting fitter. What he did is link it to a habit that he had. So he said the simplest one was when he went to the toilet. So straight after he'd been to the toilet, he'd look for a wall outside the toilet and he'd do 2 push-ups. And if he did that, he'd celebrate. And by celebrating, he said sometimes he wouldn't do more than 2 push-ups. He might do 10, 15. And every time he went to the toilet during the day, he would do 2 push-ups and celebrate, at least 2. He said over the week, it didn't look like much. At the end of the first month, it started to look like stuff. By the end of 3 months, he was like, wow, look at me. That's a really simple way of stretching yourself daily, is to link it to a habit you've already do, such as waking up, brushing your teeth, going to the toilet, getting to work, whatever it is, adding that tiny new habit, and then make sure the moment you've done it, celebrate. However you celebrate. I like to do the party dance. What that does is encourage us to do more of it. It puts the feel-good chemicals in our bloodstream versus the old approach, which was you set goals, you didn't achieve them, and you beat yourself up, so you feel worse, less likely to set goals. So the idea is celebrate when you make those tiny changes. Now, the next one is to journal. And this is one that I've picked up off my coach, and it's certainly one that over time has really helped me when change has been happening. For example, if we had at one stage, we had a business partner go belly up, that had a big impact down on our business for a little while. And by journaling, it got me to see what was important and the fact that we would be able to get through this. One of the things you can do in your journal is to reflect, what can I start doing? What do I need to stop doing because it's no longer serving me and helping me to adapt to change? And what can I keep doing? The other thing is to journal about what you're grateful for. That focus on gratitude allows us to feel good and remember what a great life we had. Again, that allows us with those feel-good chemicals to be able to adapt to change much better. The other thing is with journaling, you can write what you want your future to look like, and then you can examine each day or each week about how much faster you are getting there, or whether you've got a bit sidestepped, not sidestepped, but you know what I mean, so that you aren't on track anymore. The journaling is just a fabulous way of reflecting on what's happening, calming yourself and saying, well, it is what it is. How do I move forward on this? Rather than, why does this always happen to me? I'm curious, does anyone else use journaling? It looks like a couple of people do. Excellent. All right. Now, I love this one. You want to fly? So if you want to fly, you have to give up what weighs you down. My coach very much talks about, and a lot of people have shared this with me, you are the sum of the 5 people that you hang around with the most. If the people you hang around with the most don't really like change, aren't open to change, one of the things that you might want to do is spend a little less time with them and find a couple of new friends that are more open to change. That way, they're encouraging you rather than going, oh, I wouldn't do that. You want people who encourage you to adapt, because long-term, that ability to adapt is going to be something that is really, really important for your career, for your life, and particularly for your health and well-being. So there may be particular people that you want to spend less time with because they're not adapting. There may be particular places you go which don't really encourage you to adapt. There may be particular pursuits which keep you stuck in a rut. Use your journal to examine those and think about, how can I do it differently so that I can enjoy this process and adapt to change? Okay. Now, I'm interested, what sort of things are you going to work on in terms of your ability to adapt to change moving forward? One of the things I've been doing is using the tiny habits, and I've started when I sit on the toilet is just checking in on where I'm at, taking a couple of nice deep breaths to quieten myself and calm myself. I've also booked an adventure a month. So every month I'm making sure that I do something like an art class or going to a concert, for argument's sake, do something outside what I would normally do just to see the world differently. And I've started reading a lot of new authors and books from different perspectives that I've not looked at before. Okay, so some people are going to journal, a couple more just, it is what it is. Fabulous. Excellent. The end of the day, remember, tiny changes will help us. Now, as always, we like to support you during the month with some good resources. We talked about earlier, Sleep is Your Superpower, the TED Talk by Matt Walker. The Tiny Habits author, BJ Fogg, has also done a TED Talk. He did that about 10 years ago. I encourage you to have a watch of this particular one. He wrote his book based on this TED Talk and further research that he's done. Catherine Sanford, Adapting to Change, Why It Matters and How to Do It, and Anti-Fragile, which is a really difficult book to read. It spun my mind out many, many times. A lot of times I was reading it going, not really sure I understand it, but I'm going to stick with it. What he talks about is most things are fragile. So a lot of things such as a glass is fragile. You drop it, it breaks. If there's change, it breaks. Nature is quite often anti-fragile. So trees sway. So even though if there's a big wind, mostly they sway, which makes them anti-fragile. A lot of people are fragile because when change happens, it tends to break them. By following some of his philosophies, we can use this to adapt ourselves and become anti-fragile. So we see and we become strengthened by change rather than reduced by change. But I highly encourage you reading that book. He's got some fabulous books. Now, next month, we're going back to our normal time of 10:30. And on Wednesday, the 11th of March, we're going to be talking about employee appreciation. We've put a link here to our full list of webinars for 2020, and I encourage you to get on that and join up. Even if you can't make the webinars, you will receive a recording of the webinars. So just before we finish up, just checking, is there any final questions? Doesn't look like there is any. Well, I would love to remind you that today is going to be a great day. Have a wonderful day. I look forward to seeing you on next month's webinar on employee appreciation. And until then, have a magical month. All right, take care. Thank you.